Hi, I'm Tamara, and this is Tell Us Talks with Tamara Taggart. Hi, everyone. Today we are speaking with Nick North, who was assigned female at birth, carried 4 children, and came out in his 30s as a transgendered man. He's also a branding expert, a storyteller, a producer, and the documentary that he produced is called Just Another Beautiful Family. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge that I am speaking with you from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations, where I have the opportunity to work and live with my family. Nick, it is so good to see you. I'm stumbling off the top already. I don't know why. I need to warm up my vocal cords or something.
Probably my handsome good looks. That's what does it every time.
This happens to me sometimes, you know.
I mean,
how are you? Listen, I have done a deep dive onto your Instagram. I watched your documentary. I have been through your website, and I have to tell you, your family, first of all, is gorgeous. And I know you know
have
this.
That privilege. It's a delight.
But no, really, they're just like, your kids are adorable, and your wife is wonderful, and your home, your aesthetic, everything. You have chickens. Like you're kind of living my dream life right now, living on a hobby farm, and it's just so refreshing to see some positivity around a blended family. And I know that that's part of what you do, right? Is that kind of the message you want people to understand?
I don't know. I'm kind of like a hype guy for the masses, right? So like whatever it is that you're doing that's brave and interesting and fun and like true to you, I'm like, yes, let's celebrate that thing and do that thing. And, you know, for me, I love to change the narrative around what we sort of are taught. And so the narrative around trans people is that we get murdered, we are poor, we're oppressed, we're marginalized, which are also true. They're true facts. But there's a whole other complex story and tapestry and life that we have that isn't shown because we're not afforded that. We're afforded 1,000 different views of the cis straight white man, but we are afforded like one look at what a trans person's life might look like. And you know, we get Laverne Cox. That's it. That's like on Orange is the New Black. She is the one. And I am so grateful for her. And now we have more, you know, we have the Stars of Pose and we have all these other people. We have Elliot Page coming out is huge. But before that, we don't get much else. And I think the same is true for blended families. This story is the evil stepmother who hates the stepkids, who they never connect. They always blah, blah, blah. She's trying to steal their dad's fortune. I don't even know what the stories are. They're just all terrible.
Yeah.
And for us, that's not our story. Our story isn't that Chris and I hate each other. Our story is that like, wow, that was complicated. And wow, we all had a lot going on. And wow, we did the best we knew how to do without a guidebook for how to leave your husband for your wife and then come out as a man.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So Chris is your ex-husband.
He is, yeah.
Okay, so for the first 30 years of your life, you lived as a woman.
I did.
So you also had 4 children.
Yeah. I did it all. I really was like, if I'm going to do this girl thing and this body is going to make me do this, I am going to give it everything I have. I'm going to wear nail polish. I'm going to get knocked up. I'll do it 4 times just to see, you know, like the only thing that ever worked for me out of being a woman was being able to be a mom, because being a mom, we all know it. Moms are better than dads. Isn't that like the thing? Like dads are the butt of the joke. Moms are the ones that like kids go home to. Dads don't know what's even going on. And, you know, that's not actually, there's sweeping generalizations, but if you ask someone who's more important to the average kid, their mom or their dad, the bias is that it's their mom. And so I was really good at being a mom. I was like top notch at loving my kids. And it was the thing that I had the most pride in. And it was like, oh, I can do this. This is the one thing that feels good.
You were married. You married Chris very young. You were very young.
Yeah, I was 19. And we were like nice Christian people. He comes from a nice Christian family. And we got married and like, we're like, yeah, that's what you do when you're best friends with someone and then you date them. And then you're like, well, I guess we get married. And then like 4 or 5 years later, we bought a house and we had the dog and we had all these empty rooms. And we were like, kids now. Yeah. And we always had talked about wanting 4 kids. I don't know why. It was like from the get-go, we both had this idea of like, we wanted a big family full of a lot of love and laughter and like goodness. And it didn't work out the way that we had planned, but that doesn't mean that we don't still have a big family full of laughter and goodness and joy and like Sunday dinners and all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Did you want that because you didn't have that growing up?
Yeah, I didn't. I grew up, my parents got divorced when I was 2. I was an only kid until I was like 9. And then my dad had 2 more kids with his new wife. And then when I was 13, my mom had another kid with her new partner. And I didn't ever really fit anywhere. I don't speak to my mom at all anymore. My dad and I have a fine relationship, but he's a great grandpa and he lives in Ontario. And, but I didn't grow up with him all the time. He was like a in and out of my life figure. And so I think I wanted to create that thing that I didn't have. And I wanted my kids to feel loved beyond belief in a way that I never had, right?
I think that happens to a lot of us parents. I think that even when we're younger, we have these ideas in our head that when I'm a parent, I'll never do this, or when I'm a parent, I don't want to, I'll never yell at whatever it might be, right? I'll love them more. I'll do this, I'll do that, or whatever it might be. And then when we do have children, we start to create almost that. I think obviously I'm generalizing too, but if you've had trauma in your childhood, there is that fantasy that you want to create a different life.
Different story, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's why I asked that question.
Yeah. I mean, Chris's parents are awesome. So I think for him, his brother he's an extrovert, and his brother got married at 18 and went off into the world, and Chris was this like 13-year-old kid who was like really lonely all the time and was like, oh, it would have been so great to have brothers and sisters. And so I think that our combining worked out just great for us. So
yeah. So let's talk about let's talk about coming out and what that looks like for a transgender person. So is it like, how do you just wake up? I'm asking you questions that that may seem really like,
just give it to me.
You know what I mean? But I really want people to understand, because I think we all have a different understanding of something that we don't really understand. Mm-hmm. And all you have to do is like look at social media or something and understand how much hate there can be towards the transgender community, because I think that there's so much fear around it. Like it's something, you're going to catch or something. And I don't think people understand how it is for somebody who knows they were born into the wrong body.
Yeah, I think it's this thing where partially it's people are just bigoted. The other part is that we know that it's a harder life for trans people. And so as any parent, I don't want my kids to be trans because it's a harder life for them. It's a harder path for them. Not because I think there's anything wrong with being trans. I think I get a lot of my superpowers, so to speak, from being trans. And from my lived experience, but I don't want them to feel about their body the way that I have felt about my body. I don't want a life that is harder for them. And so I think sometimes parents, we get scared, and so we attack something because that's the way we keep ourselves safe. And yeah, there's a lot of bigoted people out there because they were taught that they're supposed to, it's not a woman's this, and what makes a man is a penis, and blah, 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 and all those ridiculous things that totally ignore actual science like intersex people and all these different, we know that gender is a spectrum. It's not a binary. That's science, as people like to say, and so I don't know, for me, going back to the original question, which was, how did I know? I always sort of knew. As a kid, I knew who I was. I knew that who I was didn't match who everyone was making me be. I didn't understand it. I didn't quite get it, but I remember being like, but why? Like, why do I have to wear this dress? And I remember sitting on the stairs of my house. My grandma lived with me, and she sort of raised me, and like just in tears. And she was like, listen, kid, this is not going to happen for you. So you're just going to have to there's nothing you can do about it. This is just, it is what it is. And you have to just live your life. And I believe that she was just trying to keep me safe. I mean, it was the 90s. It was the early 90s, and how the only thing you knew about queer people was that they get AIDS and die. That's what you knew about queer people in the 90s. And so it was just, she was trying to keep me safe, and she just shut it down. And the only person that I knew who was queer was my stepmom's friend, and he died of AIDS. And so all of my wait a second, this isn't allowed, this isn't good. And I grew up in Oshawa, which is now a much lovelier place than it was at the time. But it was, it wasn't a place where people had a lot of exposure to people different than them. And I didn't know that trans people existed. I didn't know that we were a thing. I thought that I was literally the only one, and what? And so I just worked my best at trying to be a girl, and I thought, oh, well, maybe I need to find the right kind of girl to be. I'll try being a skater girl, and I'll try being this kind of girl, and I'll be an artist, and I'll be this, and none of it fit. Ever. It was like a bunchy, like wearing a snow coat underneath a sweater or something,
Yeah, you didn't feel you weren't comfortable in yourself.
No, I always had a wall up.
Right.
To protect myself, because I couldn't let anyone in to see who I really was, because who I really wasn't okay.
Right. And I think that, it's funny. I think back about, I'm a lot older than you. And when I was growing up, it was always, if you weren't the girl wearing the dress, you were a tomboy. And so you got labeled different things as a young girl, right? Like either you like to play with the boys, or you like to play with the girls, or you like to play with Barbies, or you like to play with, you know what I mean? It was there were so many hard lines that you had to stay in. And I just feel like it's not like that anymore. But again, I live in the city, and I'm not living in a small town somewhere, and I'm not, I guess I'm exposed to more, if you will.
Yeah. When we lived in Okotoks, it was definitely harder. Our kids had Epic had a man bun for a while, and the kids in his class made fun of him for it because that's girl hair. I was like, it's literally called a man bun, dude.
It has man in the name of the bun.
Right? I don't understand. But he cut his hair because they were teasing him.
Right.
Here, that wouldn't happen. We live on Salt Spring Island now. Everyone's doing their own thing. They're all unschooling and homeschooling and wolf schooling.
I think they invented the man bun.
I think they probably did invent the man bun.
I have lots of friends that live on Salt Spring. I'm envious of how wonderful it is there.
Every single one of our schools has a rainbow crosswalk painted across it. That's just the norm. That's what you expect, So
let's talk about Nick. I'm curious as to, so you and Chris are married. You have 4 children together. Meanwhile, Catherine, who is your wife, and Chris is your ex-husband. So just so everybody has this straight. So where is Catherine when did you guys know each other before, or when did you meet?
Yeah, so Catherine and I have friends in common, and we had a friend that introduced us, and then we were both speaking at a conference in Pennsylvania, at an entrepreneurs conference. And we met and instantly became best friends. It was like that feeling of like, oh, I know you. Who are you? And I had Wild with me because they were only 6 months old at the time. And Catherine just became my best friend. And she went back to Oregon. I went back to Calgary or Okotoks or wherever. And we just stayed best friends. And we kept in touch. And then her and our eldest daughter came to visit the following, like a few months later, and stayed with us for a week. And so the kids and Chris already knew our Catherine and everything. And we were just truly just friends. And a year later from that, I was in Oregon and we were working on her website because I'm a brand strategist. And we sort of had the like, oh crap, we're in love with each other. I have to go end my marriage now conversation. This is uncomfortable.
Right,
okay.
right.
And so I came home from Oregon and I ended my marriage. And there wasn't like a dating period. It was like, if we're going to do this, you live in a different country. I live in a different country. We have kids. Like, are you in all the way? Do you want to get married? Essentially from the get-go. And it just was a yes always. And I think it's because we were best friends first. There wasn't, and we were best friends and I identified female at the time. And so, or presenting as female. And it was that thing where, how women's friendships are like the kind that you just know everything about each other. That's still how I have friendships. I don't know how to make friends with dudes because we're like, yeah, grass is cut really nice, right? Like, they really got the line straight on that.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do it. And so it was that deep kind of friendship where she already knew all my secrets and all the ones that I was admitting to myself at the time anyway. And so we had a long distance relationship. I would fly back and forth to Oregon every other weekend because Chris would take the kids every other weekend. And so on Thursday night, I would give the kids to Chris, and every other weekend I would fly to Oregon and I would fly home Sunday night, and they'd go to school Monday morning from my house. And we just made it work until we got her permanent residency and got married and did the whole thing. Yeah. And so we're completely blended now.
Yeah. And so Chris, your ex-husband, lives on the same property as you and your wife.
He lives back and forth between Calgary and this bunkie that Sawmill Structures gave us this like bunkie kit. And it's like Lincoln logs and you build it together and it's like a cool building and it's just in our backyard. And it doesn't have running water. So we're going to have to work on that one day maybe. But he just stays there. It has like, it's got a loft with his bedroom in it and he's got it like set up like a living room. So him and the kids will go down there and have games night or they'll watch TV together or have sleepovers. And then we just do all of our meals together in the house and all that kind of stuff. So it's a modern family.
It is a modern family for sure. And I mean, listen, when my parents divorced when I was 10, they couldn't even look at each other.
Yeah.
So I think that as, the product of divorced parents when I was a young kid to watch the documentary of you and your like, it's just, I mean, it's so beautiful and such a foreign concept to me, right? I think I'm more interested in your blended family than I am to me, you're just Nick, right? I don't know you other than Nick. So that's what I'm like. And
I think it's way more interesting too, if I'm going to be honest. I'm like, as a blended family, we're more interesting.
I think it's really fascinating. And also a really great example of how to live your life for the people that you love the most, who are your children, right? Because that's how we raise healthy, happy communities, is by making sure that, all of our children everywhere are loved and healthy and happy and safe.
And the only way you can do that is if you are loved and happy and healthy and safe. And if you are depressed and living a lie and hate your life, you are not giving your kids the childhood, I bet you, that you wish that you were, right? If you, even just like, I don't know if you've read the book, What Happened to You, that Oprah and Dr.
I have it on my counter. I haven't read it, and I know it's going to be,
But we
yeah.
know now that like parents staying together and fighting and being unhappy is way worse for kids than just splitting and being happy.
Yes.
And our kids know that we're so much happier as friends than we ever were as spouses. And it doesn't mean that it wasn't messy. Chris did not love that I left him for someone else. That was not super good. And it wasn't like about leaving him for someone else. It was about like, oh, I realized that I'm actually really into women. So sorry.
Yeah.
It so happened that I had fallen in love with someone else, but life's complicated.
Oh,
And,
it sure is.
you
So
know-
I want to talk about that because I'm curious as to how. So when you and Catherine got married, you were identifying as female.
Yes.
So how? Here's what I want to know. I guess is like, did you know? Like, so you're not gay. You're trans.
Yeah. But did I know that before I married my wife? And when did I tell her?
Well, no, it's not even. I don't.
That's the question people always want to know.
Well, no, it's for me. It's like I want to know how you, because I always hear people say things like that, like, oh, so like if they see, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example and I can't really, but it's like, oh, well, then they're lesbians, and it's like, well, no, that's it, you know what I mean? And it's like people really need to label everything, right? They need to label everything, and it's like, oh, well, they're this or they're that, and it's like.
We're way more complex than that. We're way more interesting than that. It's like we're not all made of like one color thread. It's, you know what I mean? Like we are so much more interesting and complex than that. And sexuality and like who you are attracted to and who you feel like inside are two totally different things. And it's the heteronormative way of assuming that they're connected. If we take, they're separate things. And I personally identify as a queer trans person because I'm like, oh, I could love anyone. I'm whatever, and I pass, which is a problematic term, but as cisgender, which means as the gender as I was assigned at birth, matching who I feel like I am inside. And I pass as like a regular dude, so to speak. And that gives me a ton of privilege that it shouldn't give me. But it also takes away my queer visibility because my wife and I walk around with our 5 kids and we look like a really nice Mormon couple. And then they see my tattoos and my wife's sailor mouth and it's all over, and they realize what's going on here. And then my ex-husband comes out and they're like, wait, you two were married and now you two are married, but you all live together. So it's not traditional, but it works for us. And we, I think because Chris came from a really loving set of parents, his parents love the crap out of each other even now. He, I think, was like, oh no, our children can't come from a broken home. And so for him, the motivation was he wanted his kids to feel just as loved as he did growing up, whatever that meant. And the motivation for me was that I didn't ever want my children to feel like I felt growing up, whatever that meant. And so it was messy, for the first 10 months, I kept my life with the kids completely separate from my life with Catherine. I wanted them to experience a Christmas without their dad and I together, but not with someone else. They all had a birthday. They all started school. They all ended school. We gave them as much time to grieve one thing before starting the next thing, but not being like, now here's your new mom. Here she is. So, we started, we did it really purposefully. We used the help of a therapist because that's just smart, is to use an expert when you don't know what you're doing. And we made a plan and we tried our best to communicate it, and we didn't do it perfectly, but here we are,
But here we are, and you're very open about it. The documentary, Just Another Beautiful Family, is it's about 20 minutes long, is it?
It's 19 minutes and 56 seconds.
Oh, there we go. So I was close. Sorry. It's just a beautiful peek inside the life of a family, and I think that it is. You're also very open and honest and real, which is, I mean, it's hard to find sometimes, right? Without, what I loved about the documentary is it was just like the doors were open for, 20 minutes and I got to look inside and see just another beautiful family.
Yeah, and we have challenges.
Of course you do. I'm not, listen.
Yeah, I'm having a surgery during it. But the challenges are no different than your challenges, than someone else's challenges, and someone else's challenges. I don't know what it's like to have a child with a disability. And I never can put myself in those shoes until I do. You can never know what it's like to be a trans person.
Yeah.
But what we can do is we can say, can I please have a window into what your life is like? Because I bet you it's different than the broad strokes we've been painted with.
100%. So we like to give back on this podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd like to say thank you for being here. And I mean, I'm loving this conversation. I have so many questions for you. So what we do is we ask our guests to pick a Canadian charity, and we will give them $500 in your name. And you chose Community, which is a nonprofit organization based in Vancouver that works to improve queer, trans, and two-spirit lives. Why did you pick them?
Because they're close to where I live, and they work with trans people specifically with a look on two-spirit people, so the indigenous population. And, I think that as white people do, we have co-opted transness even out of the experience. And, when you think of a trans masculine person, you typically think of a white skinny guy that looks just like me. And there's lots of us, that's cool, but there's a whole bunch more than just that. And if I have this much trouble in the world, imagine what a two-spirit woman of color, like our two-spirit woman, deals with. And it's a lot worse than what I have going on. And so I like helping the people in my community that are sort of not helped as much as they should be.
I love it. So what do what's your advice to anybody who's listening, who is feeling, the same things that you felt when you were younger, or maybe a parent's listening and they know that their child is feeling the same way that you felt as a child? I don't want to say what's your advice, but what are your thoughts around that? Like, is there anything you do different, or how would you talk to, a child that is feeling these feelings?
Yeah, I think for kids, the message is very much like, if you're safe to be yourself, you should be yourself. If you can, if that's safe for you, you should absolutely do that. And if it's not safe for you, trust your gut and your instinct. And there will be a time when you can be yourself. And hold on and find people that you can be yourself with, because they're out there. And just hold on and it'll be okay. You just have to get through the hard part. And to the parents, I think that your feelings, although they are big, they don't matter. And you're allowed to have your feelings. You're supposed to. But have them in the right spot. Have them with a therapist. Have them with not your child. Because your job to your kid is to say, oh my goodness, thank you for telling me, and celebrate who they are. That doesn't mean you're not scared. It doesn't mean you should run out and book surgery for them. No one is asking that of you. But we know that your kid is at the most risk for taking their life between the time they say, hi, I'm trans, I need help, and the time that they start to get help. And that is 5 times the average of any other kid. And so that risk goes down completely to what is normal for a regular teenager when they have one important person in their life supporting them. And that's all it takes. It doesn't mean you don't get to have your feelings. It doesn't mean that you don't get to express them somewhere. It just means that your job is to bite your tongue and celebrate your kid for who they are and their bravery to tell you who they are. And the fact that they have a relationship with you that they were willing to tell you. Because most kids are not willing to tell you that. So if they're coming to you early on, it means that they have figured it out because you did a really good job at letting them be themselves. And because they know that they can trust you to be themselves and that you're safe. Like I said, if it's not safe for you to tell your parents, don't, and you know. And so if they did tell you, it means that they're trusting you. And that's a big deal.
That's really beautiful. And, I think it's good advice, even though I didn't ask you for advice, but it's good. You know what I mean? I'm not asking you for advice.
I know what you mean, but it's
but you know what I mean? It's for anything though, really, Nick, isn't that our job as parents is to let our small people that we made, who we've, whether that, however they came into the world, to be who they are and to find themselves and to be happy. Because I think that for so many of us, the unhappiness comes from being told you can't be that, or you can't do this, or that's wrong, or you shouldn't think this, or you shouldn't say that, or no, you don't feel that way. There's all these rules, and I think it's an old-fashioned way of thinking, but I also think that there's we still have a very long ways to go.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean that, like, oh, your kid tells you that they want this, and so you should just jump to it. Like, I'm saying be age appropriate, right? But the cool thing is like, if your kid is 10 to 12 or under, there literally is there's nothing for you to do other than call them a different name and maybe give them a different fashion. Haircut, clothes, name. That's it. Those are the steps. And if people are like, oh, well, they need to be older to understand. I'm like, well, if you just let them try on who they were when the only changes were haircuts and fashion and names, you would know that by the time they're old enough to need intervention, which is at first is just puberty blockers, which is literally pushing pause. We do it for so many other reasons. It's not like, there's all these fears around we're pushing the trans agenda. We'll just make girls into boys and boys. And like, no one is saying that. Well, literally that's so great. What can I do to support you? Do you want to change your name, or is there a way that you want to express yourself differently? No? Okay, cool. Yes. All right. We could do that. That's it. Mm-hmm. It's not so complicated. It doesn't have to be so scary.
No, as humans, we tend to make things way scarier than they need to be. And, and some really just take it a little too far. Before we wrap up, I just want to ask you about your body. And the reason I want to ask you that is because I know that, for lots of us when we're growing up, we don't like our bodies, and we're embarrassed of our, how fast we've grown or how little we've grown or whatever it might be. You had top surgery done. Mm-hmm. And I quite a while ago when I was working in news, I did a story with a young woman who went for top surgery, and that journey, like being a witness to that, was a real privilege. And also, I really got a different understanding from her very supportive mother, like who was there for and her supportive father. Again, not saying it wasn't messy along the way. Of course it was.
Humans.
Life is so messy.
I screw up all the time.
Yeah, me too. And but it really gave me a different perspective, because there is meaning behind, like, no one comes to that decision lightly, I guess is what I'm trying to say, right? It's not like you wake up and you're like, you know what? I think I'm going to do this,
breasts,
and I'm going to
super good.
So I mean, yeah, it takes a lot to get there, but it doesn't end after that surgery, right? Whatever I guess what I'm trying to ask is, the journey is long, right?
Yeah, it's not, people like to medicalize transition, but it's not. I felt fully transitioned, so to speak, years ago, long before my top surgery, because I had stepped into who I was. I could see myself as who I was supposed to be. It didn't mean that I didn't want to align my body more physically with the way that I knew who I was, but I wouldn't have said, oh, I'm not done transitioning. I would have been like, oh, I've fully realized who I am, even if my testosterone is still having effects on my body, right? So it's this complicated thing because for me, top surgery was life or death. Like it was very difficult for me to be in my skin on a daily basis. It meant that I didn't swim with my kids. It meant I didn't do a ton of things that you would do because I was wearing a terrible, awful binder that rubbed my skin raw and blah, 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 because that was the only way that I could get myself to like leave the house. Mm-hmm. And so it's this sort of complicated thing where like that's not what is transition. It's not this medical thing where you're there or you're not there. I'll never get to live in a cisgender body. I'll never have been born with the anatomy that I wish I was born with. I can't change that. There's like substitution, there's prosthetics, there are things that you can do to get closer to that, but I will never experience that. And that there is a grieving that happens in that. And I think, when you were talking to Rebecca of Sit Pretty, there's a grieving that happens with the fact that like she'll never be able to go chase after her kid, in a certain way or something like that, right? Like there's grieving that happens with a parent with a child with disability because we imagine who they're going to be. I imagined who I was going to be, mm-hmm. and I imagined who I would be after my transition. And to be perfectly honest, I don't measure up, I balded way too quick. Like, this is a real problem for me. I was like, I only got to have good hair for like a year. And then instantly it traveled from my head to my butt. And I was like, whoa, what is this about? That's not even fair. And so now I have to wear hats all the time or I'm a bald dude. And, it is what it is. But it's not how I envisioned myself 5 years into my transition, was like a bald guy with a patchy beard, Like, that's not how I was like, yeah, I'll be so buff and I'll have great hair and I'll have a beard like a rock star.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, I noticed that on your Instagram. I mean, I love your Instagram. I'm a new follower, as you know.
Yes.
But I that's what I love about how you share your story, is because it's real, right? You're like, okay, where's my hair? This is not, and you did have really good hair. You had that like a really cute haircut.
I believe that it was part of my identity. Losing my hair, even when I identified as female, it was like I always had fun, interesting, quirky hair. And so it like really losing my hair, it was one of the things that was like on my list of like, well, if I transition, I could lose my hair.
There's some things we just can't control now.
We just can't control it. I'm just going to have to be bald.
Exactly. I will say, though, I do love your glasses. That's the other thing I noticed on your Instagram. You have really good glasses. As you can see, I like a strong frame.
You and me both, sister.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're a delight to talk to, really. I really appreciate your willingness to share your story, especially in the documentary. And I really recommend everybody just Google it. Just Another Beautiful Family. You can watch it with your family. It's PG.
Yeah, it's PG. It's a good time.
It is, and it's a really important. I think it's an excellent documentary to watch. It's 20 minutes, just under 20 minutes, and it's great to watch as a family because it will definitely, get the conversation going with your own children. And
yeah, sometimes you don't know how to start that conversation. It's weird to be like, so you know about trans people, right?
Exactly.
Like, that's like a weird opener, but this is like an easier way to get to that.
Well, the good news, Nick, is that, my kids know more about transgender people than I ever did, because they learn everything in school now, and there's open conversations. And like you said, there's characters on television and documentaries like yours and the willingness to share stories. So I think that it's really, people like you are changing the way that conversations are happening in a positive positive way.
Well, thank you.
Really, truly. Okay, so Nick and his family, his amazing family, adorable kids, 5 kids, 5 blended family. The website is WeTheNorths. That's with an S.com. And you can also follow Nick on Instagram and Facebook at WeTheNorths. Nick, thank you so, so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of TELUS Talks with Tamara Taggart. Be sure to subscribe so you can join us every Tuesday for another conversation. You can also check out our website, TELUS.com/podcast, and subscribe to our YouTube channel at TELUS Talks.